about 10 or so students. So want to welcome all the students that joined. We appreciate you and welcome you to this panel. We have a great group of panelists with a great moderator in Risa, Isard. Thank you for coming to the Sports for Good, for Real panel. So with that, I'm Roger Jones. I am on the board of Sports Biz Camps DC. We have our Scott Burgess, who's our rock star. He's going to be taking questions. He's also going to be running this. Without further ado, I'm going to pass it to Risa, and we'll get this panel started.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Roger. And thanks so much to all of you who are here joining us this afternoon, this morning, depending on where you are in the world. Welcome to the Sports Biz Camp Locker Room Chat. We're going to be talking all things sports for good, for real. So beyond corporate responsibility, really to social change. My name is Risa Isard. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a sports industry vet and policy expert. What I'm passionate about more than anything else in sport is how we use sport to advance social issues. Racial justice, rights for girls and women, LGBTQ+ inclusion, acceptance for people with disabilities, normalizing mental health topics, stewarding the environment, like you name it, sport has something to say about it. And that's why I'm so excited for this conversation that we're gonna have and to be here with these panelists today. Kevin Merida from ESPN and the Undefeated, Danita Johnson from the LA Sparks, and Ann Lieberman from Athlete Ally are pros at using sport to create a better world. And they're some of the most influential people in sports biz right now doing this really, really important work. So I've got some questions for them. I hope you do too. I know you do too. Scott is gonna be mining the Q&A box. So be sure you send your questions in as they come up and we will get to as many as we can. Real quick before we get started, there's like a lot of Zoom happening in the world today. So thank you so much for joining us and do what you need to do to make this time work for you. We can't see you or hear you. So if you wanna do some jumping jacks or push-ups, you want to be coloring or doodling while you're listening, if that's going to help you take this in. You want to go for a walk and take us with you on your phone, like get cozy and comfy with your favorite snack. Whatever works for you, do it. This is your time, and we're so glad you're here with us. So really, without further ado, I'm going to let our panelists introduce themselves, what I'm calling like a playing card bio. So if you all could share, we'll go in alphabetical order from Ann to Danita to Kevin. If you could share your name, your pronouns, your position, and your team, aka your title and the organization you work for, your favorite sport to watch or play, and your favorite team or athlete to cheer for.
Hi, everyone. I am Ann Lieberman. I use she or they pronouns, and I'm the Director of Policy and Programs with Athlete Ally. My favorite sport to play or participate in is Muay Thai. So if you're not familiar with Muay Thai is like American-style kickboxing. It's a martial art that originates in Thailand. But in addition to your hands and feet, you can also use your elbows and your knees to strike. And I am a coach and an active fighter. I've been fighting and coaching for about a decade. It's a fantastic sport, so I love watching that as well. My favorite team to root for is any single team from Pittsburgh. I'm from Pittsburgh. I bleed black and gold, and those of you who are sports fans, which is all of you, know that Pittsburgh fans are intense and a little nuts. So I'm a proud Pittsburgh fan.
Thanks, Ann. We're so glad you're here with us.
Hi, I'm Danita Johnson. I'm the president and COO of the Los Angeles Sparks, the women's professional basketball team. I go by she or her pronouns. My favorite team, obviously, is the LA Sparks. Been rooting for them since I've been working for them for the past few years. Favorite athlete? I have like 12 of them, and they're all on my roster, so I'll definitely go with my squad on that. But I think probably one of my favorites of all time is I'm a big Lisa Leslie fan and a big Diana Taurasi fan. If we go outside of just my every day-to-day, two women that have very good examples of what they do on the court and off the court. With that, my favorite activity when I used to play basketball. That was fun, but I'm like a spinner now. Like me and my Peloton are all in one, and every day I got to get on my bike or else I don't feel right. So,
love it. Thanks so much, Danita.
I'm Kevin Merida, and I'm a senior vice president at ESPN and editor-in-chief of the Undefeated. and I go by he, they pronoun. It's hard. Basketball is my favorite sport. I love to play myself still, and love to watch. I root for the local teams, but I root for many other teams that I just like to watch. So certainly the Mystics and Wizards, gotta rep them. Loved watching that Mystics team last year win the championship. Just loved it. And players, wow, that's just so hard. I like to shoot and the shooter, so I like, Steph is probably one of my favorite players to watch. Just his craftsmanship as a shooter. But there's so many, and I would be here all day naming them, so I'll stop.
Awesome.
Kevin, don't forget the Hoyas.
I grew up with the John Thompson Hoyas for sure.
Awesome. Well, we're so glad to have you all here, coming from really a lot of different parts within the industry, right? We've got nonprofits, we've got, leading a pro team, we've got sports journalism and media. Before we get to the powerful work that you each do today, I want to take a step back, because you were in high school at some point. And I'm curious, when you were in high school, what did you think you'd be doing as a career? Whoever wants to jump in first can go for it, and we'll all take turns.
All right, I'll jump in. I'll take advantage of the pause. I was in the first class of busing in Prince George's County, Maryland, and it was a really traumatic experience of just leaving your neighborhood school and getting bused around the Beltway and having to go to school, get up at 6 o'clock in the morning. I played basketball. I'd be getting back at 7 o'clock. So I was like a long work day, like the kind of work days I have now. And it was school, and you kind of disconnected from the social interaction of school, which is, I think, very important. And it was just a really difficult time. And there was a teacher that really invested in me and really kind of prevailed upon me to be part of the student newspaper, even though it required staying after school or getting to essay contests. And, at that time, being a journalist was something that I kind of knew about from, mainly from reading sports pages of my local paper, which happened to be a really good local paper, the Washington Post. And I had a notion about that in connecting sports to journalism, but you sometimes just need people to push you, and by the time I left high school, I really was set that, I'm going to give this a shot as a career. I'm going to pursue journalism as a career. And it, started with that teacher, Linda Warner, and so, I know how important it is when you have influences in school that can direct your mind a certain way. It's not that you have to stay there. I think in this world, there are a lot of opportunities to explore careers, change careers, experiment, but it's great to have somebody point you in a direction so you can at least start aiming at something. And for me, it was, man, I ended up doing it. And, here I am still doing it all these years later.
I love it. Danita, I know you wanted to jump in, yeah.
Yeah, I honestly didn't really know when I was in high school exactly what it would look like or be. It was really my college experience that helped evolve my career path. I did know from high school, like I played basketball, I played soccer, and I knew from those experiences, like it was the only thing I felt really connected to growing up was my sports experiences. And so with that, when I started looking at schools, I remember to the day, I could still visually see the college brochure, and it had it listed out different majors, and there was a dot next to coaching, and there was a dot next to sports management. And I was like, coaching is way too stressful. And that was my first thought. I remember looking at that during my senior year, and I was like, I don't necessarily know what the sport management thing is, but I knew that I was like, I'm connected to sports and I feel good in this space. And I was like, I want to work in sports in some capacity. And so I know, college may not be for everybody, but that experience at the next level of college is what really solidified my future for me. And I think for those that have better ideas when they're in high school of exactly what they want to do, whether it's going to a technical school to get the skill that you need to do what you need to do, whatever it may be, I highly encourage that. And for me, it was that next step of going to college that helped really draw out the landscape of what was possible in the industry for me.
Love it. And Anne, I know your experience is even different than Kevin and Danita. So can you share that with us?
Absolutely. And I think I identify a lot with what Danita was saying in terms of college really being the moment for me to find this path. But and this is so funny about my high school experience, because so many of my colleagues today, now decades later, don't know this about me. But when I was in high school, I wanted to be an actor, which is so funny now. And I was really big into acting, into the musical theater scene, and did, audition for so many schools. And Fordham University was my first choice, and I was waitlisted there. So I said, you know what, I'll go to Fordham and I will try to re-audition my freshman year, because sometimes, they let like 20 kids into the program. Sometimes you can get in that backdoor way. I go to Fordham and I end up getting involved with the Black Student Union at Fordham. And we took a trip to New Orleans in the wake of Hurricane Katrina to volunteer with an amazing organization that's still around called Common Ground Collective. And they are a community-based organization doing amazing work in the lower 9th ward of New Orleans. And that trip politicized me and woke me up to so much of the consistent injustice that Black communities face in this country. And I saw the amazing work that the organizers were doing. And I was like, oh no, I don't want to act. I want to do social justice work. I want to be a community organizer. I want to do something like this, and I'll figure out where I fit in. But that whole trip changed my career trajectory, changed my life. And I ended up going back down to New Orleans on 2 different occasions to volunteer with Common Ground and then another organization. And it really, it just shifted my perspective in a really significant way.
Yeah, I remember you sharing with me last week too, that you went back from that trip and you decided to, I think at that time, to change your major to African American studies, right? That like this was going to be something you were living and breathing and learning about forevermore.
Absolutely.
So we're here to talk today about sport for good. And I'm curious, what does that phrase mean to you, right? Maybe it's kind of jargony. Maybe it's the first time some of our high school students are hearing it. Maybe people have thought about it a ton. What does sport for good mean to you? And then how do you actually use sport for good from the seat that you have? Because so often, right, these moments about sports and social change, they're like these iconic moments, right? The fist in the 1968 Olympics, or Megan Rapinoe saying, "Go gays," right? Like these are the moments that we think of. And none of you are on the playing field to take those actions, and yet you're doing so much to use sports for social change. So what does it sport for good mean to you, or sport for change mean? And then how do you actually get to do that when you yourself are not a player?
I would say for that, not being a player, I feel like I have one of the best seats in the house to be a part of this. I get to be that person that makes sure that our organization is in alignment with the goals and the views of our players and get to unite that. So they have the voices, they have the platforms, we have the ability to help activate. And that is what my job is when it comes to sport for good, is that even for myself, I have an ability, as a Black woman that leads an organization, I'm one of 2 Black females in the W that leads a team. I am the youngest of all the COOs in the league. Like, I'm very understanding of what that empowerment can be for others. So that's, when I look at the scale, we have an ability as an organization to back our players. I remember I think it was 17 when our players didn't come out for the national anthem when we played in Minnesota. And that was at a time where all the leagues hadn't quite yet got into everything from the social justice standpoint. And there was the ability for players to get fined for doing things like that. And from our ownership group, we had made the decision, if our players are about something and they don't want to do it, we'll take the fine. And that's the power that we get to do it back as organizations. And that's what also makes it exciting. And I think for me as an individual, it's moments like this. It's having the ability to talk about how we got to where we are, having the ability to create access, getting involved with mentorship programs, those things to create a pathway and create access for people is huge for us. And I think that's a responsibility that I take on each day, and knowing that that's part of my duty.
I love that. And I can't imagine what those conversations were like in 17, right? Are we going to take the fine, especially knowing that the budget you are working with from a WNBA team is not like just flush in cash. What's an extra so many hundred or thousands of dollars? Like that actually makes a difference in your bottom line. And still you and the ownership group said, yeah, and that's worth it.
Yeah, look, I think that certainly, at least from the gaze of the media, I mean, I think one of the things that we can do is both reflect what's going on and educate. You know, we can inspire, you know, and we do it through our work, you know, and the use of our platform is a catalyst for that. And so, you know, I think about things like, you know, shortly after we launched in 2016, we had a town hall. We've probably done over a dozen of them. We had one down in the south side of Chicago, right in the heart of gun violence, to talk about that. We brought community leaders and athletes together, people who are working on that every day, and we convened that, you know, and there was a great appreciation. I was still new to ESPN at that time. It was great appreciation that we had just brought these people together. We had brought the athletes and we had brought the community leaders who, you know, without a lot of ceremony, they're working on these things that you read about when people are getting shot and killed every day. That's what they're doing, right? So bringing that together, you know, as one example, you know, and I'm thinking about Danita and the Sparks, and we were talking beforehand about just the power of women athletes and how they're leading across social change. We had done a study. We partnered with Morgan State University, one of our historically Black colleges, universities in the country, to look at just the evolution of Black female athletes and the imagery and how they have been depicted over time and portrayed. And they studied that from an academic standpoint, and we put a lot of journalism around it. We showed some of the origins of Black female athletes going way back to like in the 1800s and carried it all the way up to now. And we did a song. We got together with a production house and Black artists, female artists, and we did an anthem, the Black female athletes that came out, and it was, you know, circulated widely, and we had it all over Disney, worked with Disney Music. So to me, it was putting a light on something that was important and bringing our voice to it and letting people be seen. Sometimes invisibility is its own kind of ill and crime. You know, people need to be seen for who they are and be able to be recognized so that, you know, the rest of our kids can see more images, right? They can see the possibilities of what they can become. And so I feel like that's a big part of our role with sport.
I love it. Thanks, Kevin. And you're sitting in a different seat working for an organization, a nonprofit that is outside of the sports industry, but is the sports industry. Tell us about what Sport for Good means for you and how you all do that work at Athlete Ally.
So our work really is to dismantle the structures of oppression that isolate, exclude, and endanger LGBTQI+ people in sport, and to give folks a sense of the diversity of the LGBTQI+ community in sport. You know, we talked about it a little bit before we hit record, but, you know, the sport community is absolutely not a monolith, and neither is the LGBTQI+ community in sport. And so often we only see particular narratives or stories about LGBTQ athletes. And so, you know, what Kevin is saying about visibility is a really significant one for us. And as an organization, we have an athlete ambassador program where we have over 300 pro Olympic and Paralympic athletes who have made a commitment to use their platform to speak up and out on LGBTQI+ human rights in and through sport. And the way in which we connect those athletes to opportunities to do that varies. It could be something like a social media post, writing an op-ed, etc. But the way in which athletes are able to use their platform is really significant. And far too often in sport, even though athlete activism has been around since we've had sports, you know, athlete activism is not accepted or respected. And we want to change that as an organization. And that's one part of our work. We also do a lot of education and sport policy work, which is also really significant. But we want to have a way to organize and mobilize athletes that are supported, you know, by by leadership like Danita to speak up and out on really the most important issues of our time.
Yeah. I mean, and those are all so important, right? And what I love is that you each are working on connected but different issues, right? That intersect, you know, racial justice being a focus, LGBTQIA plus inclusion being a focus, right? I think the Sparks brings that all together. Plus, you know, women and girls and the intersection of all of those. And so you're working on these different issues and you're working on them from different vantage points, but you're all using sports as this platform and as this rallying cry. And I love just seeing that there are so many different topics that sports touches and so many different ways to be using sport. You know, Danita, I want to go back to this comment you made, right? That you're one of two women of color, Black women perhaps specifically, who are leading WNBA franchises. You're the youngest one. I know that all of us, myself included, right, we're sitting here and we hold different unique identities that make us minorities in the sports industry, whether it's our race, our gender, our sexual orientation, our religion, how old we are, even when we get to a certain level in our career, right? And that's obviously different than some of these other historically oppressed identities. But just thinking about the fact that we all hold so many, you know, really a plethora of identities, and oftentimes at work, and especially in the sports business, right? Those of us who hold these minority identities sometimes feel like we have to deny these parts of ourselves that make us unique. And yet we know both anecdotally and from research that actually when we get to bring our full selves to the office, and when our colleagues do too, like we are better teams and we are more successful on and off the court. So I'm curious, each of you, like, how do these specific identities you hold that make you a minority in the sports industry, how do those inform how you think about sports business and social change? And quite frankly, how do they make you better and more successful as a team leader, as an executive, as an advocate?
I think for me, my direct connection is, you know, you've heard our athletes talk about this, over 80% of the women in WNBA are African American women, right? And I think for me as leading this team, part of my unique connection, and not even in this, but in any sport I've worked in. I've worked in the NBA, I've worked in the G League, I've worked in baseball briefly. So like I've worked at different cross sections, so it's just not that. But I think with our women's team, it's a unique connection with me because they look like me. They're the women that I looked up to when I remember watching the Phoenix Mercury on TV when they started in 96, 97, and it all began. So there's this connection that I almost feel like I owe it to them and to women and to minorities that came forward in the sports world to uplift this. Like, I feel like it's my personal responsibility that I'm invested in helping grow this because of who I am. And I remember being in an office where I was on a sales floor of like 30, 50 people, and I was the only African-American female on the sales floor. And I remember what that felt like. I remember telling myself, and I say the story a lot when I speak, is that in that moment and realizing and like even just sitting there and understanding what I was in the midst of, I knew the moment I had an opportunity to lead, that I was going to have diversity amongst my staff. And it's not only because I'm a Black woman, it was also because I understand that the fans that were coming into these buildings all look and feel different. And in order to actually relate to them, my team and my staff has to be all those things, because I'm not a Latino woman. I may not understand their life experiences. And so for me to have a true connection like that, I need that kind of knowledge in my team. So when I build staffs across the board, you know, it's funny, we just hired somebody recently and we had a one-on-one conversation, and she goes, I was shocked in our first, and she came in during a Zoom and she said, we have everything. And I said, absolutely, because we represent everything. We can't be one-dimensional. And so I think it's so important. And I think this is where you hear a lot in hiring processes, from internships for you all as high school students who go into college, why it's so important. Because thought and experience that we have as individuals, from how we grow up to even how Anne talked about the shift in her wanting to be an actor to, you know, wanting to be an activist, it was because of those experiences. And that's why it's so important. That's why people and students, why people are talking about this so much, about the hiring process and the internship is so critical, because we need that in order to build companies that represent the world we live in. And until we have that, we're going to continue to have these companies that don't necessarily represent that. And for you students, and you feel like, man, I can't really connect this, is because there's not somebody to build a genuine connection with them. So that's why we advocate for it. That's why it's so huge. And I think that's why the representation matters so much in all, across the board, whatever industry or you know, you have.
I'd love to jump in. A lot of that also resonated with me in terms of, you know, for me as a queer Jew who is femme presenting and white, I have a tremendous amount of privilege, right? And so what am I doing in my role as the director of policy and programs when we are working with teams, leagues, sport governing bodies to curate panels? What athletes are we suggesting are representing which sports? You know, are those athletes being actually appropriately compensated for their labor? And that's another big issue that we've come up against is if there are very few moments where we want to ask pro athletes, especially, you know, athletes that are traditionally overlooked and deprioritized in the sports space, like so many of the WNBA players that are amazing activists and leaders. We want to make sure folks are compensated for their time and their labor. And so a big part of this for me personally and Athlete Ally as an organization is how are we using certain aspects of our power and privilege in spaces to make sure that we are literally and figuratively passing the mic. And that is especially, you know, important to me, not only in this particular moment, but just in general, and what athletes, you know, are we saying represent sport? Because so often we have, again, representation. We have a very small slice of what the world of sport actually looks like.
Absolutely. Kevin, I know we talked about just how many identities someone holds, right? And some of them are things people see when they look at us, and some of them are just like, you know, the kind of music that we love and the kinds of culture that we find ourselves kind of gravitating toward and things like that. I mean, how do the plethora of identities you hold and in particular, perhaps the ones that make you a minority in sports media, sports business, journalism, how do they inform how you think about coverage and how you think about leading your team?
Well, look, I mean, you know, I think throughout corporate America, and I've been in media a long time, I think, you know, the senior ranks, right? You know, of people of color, and I'm going to say, you know, just to speak about Black men and Black women, you know, there's just not. The higher you get up into the ranks, you know, of media, and, you know, I worked at the Washington Post for many years before I got here, and in the newspaper business. But, you know, you see that this industry is not one, and this is the industry, my industry is the one that really helps to shape how people think and see people and come to regard others. We tell the stories of the world. And so, you know, it's really central that the storytelling that informs society really has leadership and different sensibilities that are really diverse, you know, and inclusive. And, you know, I think those of us, it can't be understated, you know, that, you know, who gets to make decisions and who gets to control the resources and how important that really is, you know, and like every single thing. It's not a small thing. You know, I'm sure Danita will have, you know, an experience in that as, you know, as a young, you know, president, you know, of a professional team. But I just know from the media standpoint that the more you get into the rooms, you know, like in Hamilton, the rooms where it matter, you know, you know how important it is. You look around and there's not many people like you. And so there's the intellectual exercise that people have when they're outside, when they're protesting. And I've been part of coming in and meeting with leaders and talking about, can we diversify things? But when you're really in the room, you realize that it's not just a thing, it's everything. It really literally is everything. It's really, you could change the culture of society. You could change everything by changing the structure of our companies and institutions. And so that part of my identity, I it took a long time for me. I was in the content creation side of it, the journalism side, the writing side of it, producing work. And that was me expressing myself in the way that I feel comfortable. I'm still a writer in my soul. I want to get back to writing books. But I do realize once I finally kind of got pulled into it and I resisted for a long time, just how really essential and that it is, that I'm there. So I'm always talking to the students out there. I mean, if you want to be a leader, and I do think, first of all, that you can lead from where you are. It's something I've always think it's you don't have to have a position, a title doesn't confer leadership. I do think you can lead from where you are. But if you want to get into the executive ranks, if you want to run the Walt Disney Company, or ESPN, I would encourage you. If you have any instinct and start your own Disney, I would encourage you, because that's where that really macro change in society can occur. It can happen like that. It's every single thing. And so, that I've become like a corporate executive, right? Which is identity I never thought I would ever have, because I didn't think that way.
We have an awesome question from a student. So I want to, Scott, will you ask it for that student?
Of course. So Angel Munoz had asked, although you all had different career paths, was using your position as a platform to address social issues always your goal? Or did it develop at some point in your lives, such as a field trip that Ann attended? And what was the moment like?
So maybe for Kevin and Danita, because I know, Ann, we heard about kind of your click moment and that pivotal moment that solidified this for you. But Kevin and Danita, how did you come by this work?
You want to go first, Kevin?
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, you can go. Go for it.
Well, look, I went to a predominantly white university, Boston University, during the 70s, when Boston was a very tense city, racially tense right after busing there. And a group of us started a Black student newspaper on campus. And the experience of that kind of like imbued into me something of importance to our community and doing things and figuring out a way to kind of represent a lot of the issues and the time that we were living in then. And, it grew from there. I came up under a lot of my mentors were some of the people Black journalists who were really trying to shake up the industry. And so I kind of got brought into that family and it stayed with me throughout my career. I thought it was important that whatever I did individually and any success that I had, that the larger question of bringing more of us into our craft and to try to keep pushing on the door to make that a more open door was really important, and I think we've continued that with the Undefeated in terms of why I left the Washington Post to start. That was what we wanted to be around a very diverse newsroom, a predominantly Black newsroom, and to really try to create something special, and with our work. And so I think I kind of lived that mostly, but it started back when as a student in Boston University.
Love it.
I think for me, it's just been lots of little moments over time. I attribute to like life experiences making me realize the importance of my voice and the importance of creating impact and wanting to create change. And it goes back kind of what I talked about a little while ago about being the only Black saleswoman on the floor, to then once I had a position of power to actually hire and actually create influence, kind of going into that and making changes. And then a lot of it really came the next phase when people would come up to me after doing events or would see me places. And even from friends like I went to high school with, like I would get these messages of like, I'm so glad you're there, or like, I'm so happy to see you in this role. And, I get messages from some friends from high school now that like, my daughter, I make sure she watches what you're doing. And I didn't understand in the beginning the importance, but it's actually the feedback. So like doing this panel and like the students and like the interacting makes me realize how important it is, because people are seeking it and they're trying to find it, and they're trying to find, what looks like them, what feels like them, how to get there, what to do. And I think it was really the inspiration of small moments in my own life, and then inspiration of others, and being in different circles of people that taught me that it matters and that it's important, and that if you have a platform, how kind of what this whole thing is about is like sport for good. And I need to use this platform for sport for good. And that's part of my personal responsibility that I have to take on. And I think anybody in a position of power or have influence needs to understand that position and how we use that for good.
Yeah. That's so powerful. I want to thank Angel for that question. Students, if you have other questions, please feel free to put them in the chat box. We're watching it, and we want to make sure that all of our panelists can speak to exactly what it is that you're wondering. So we'll keep going, but feel free to shoot more questions our way. And I want to talk about, right, this idea that like it's 2020, right? And we're living in a world in which a lot more people are open about their sexual orientation and their gender identity, right? Like marriage is legal. There are legal protections in employment. The Supreme Court ruled in favor of LGBTQ plus workers just, a month ago. Why do we still need Athlete Ally, right? And like, who is Athlete Ally working for and supporting today? What are we really facing?
I can't speak for everyone else on the panel, but I don't know if there are days that you wake up to and wonder, are we actually in 2020? Because that is the majority of my life. So, I mean, our work is far from over on so many different levels. I can speak specifically to the LGBTQI plus work. Yes, thank goodness now we're protected in employment and we're able to get married, but I still can be kicked out of a movie theater or another public place in certain parts of the country, and even in my home state of Pennsylvania for being LGBTQ. And we just have so much work to do to dismantle legal and cultural systems of heterosexism, of transphobia, of racism. All of these are connected, and we want to make sure that, especially when we think about how this impacts athletes, athletes are not only pro athletes, Paralympic, Olympic athletes, it's also people who just want to go to the gym and have a safe space to work out, and young kids who want to play the sport that they love. I mean, when we think about even this past legislative session in 2020, 19 different states introduced legislation that was specifically looking to keep trans kids from playing sport at the K through 12 level. And some of these bills were even at the college level. We're talking about 2020 and kids that want to play sports with their friends, and we have legislatures trying to keep kids and trans kids who are some of the most already ostracized kids. It's so hard to be a kid, period, these days, but to be an LGBTQ kid and to be a trans kid is often even scarier depending on where you are. And then if we look at the stats specifically in sport, over 80% of people have witnessed or experienced homophobia in sport. LGBTQI plus youth drop out of sports at a rate that's double that of their non-LGBTQ peers. I have so many stats, I'm not gonna go through the list, but they're staggering. And the piece though that is really heartening is, and this is to Kevin's point about leading from where you are, every single one of us has an ability to create change, to make a more inclusive environment on our local team, in our classroom, et cetera, to make people feel more welcome. So it's 2020. I don't know how, sometimes I don't know what's happening, but we still need Athlete Ally, and we still need all the work of the incredible folks on this panel.
Yeah, I so appreciate that. And the stats you share, they're staggering, and behind each of those numbers, there's a human being, right? And so one of the women who's really been in the limelight a lot the last year or so is Andrea Yearwood, right? Who just graduated from high school in Connecticut, is a trans girl, and an incredible track and field athlete. She's Black. I'm curious, Kevin, like when you hear these intersecting identities that athletes hold, right? Being a trans woman, being Black, having other experiences, right? Like, how does the Undefeated, in this work you're doing at the intersection of race, culture, and sport, uplift all of these intersecting identities that go along with race, culture, and sport?
Look, I think it's important. Sometimes we talk about diversity and we shrink that term, you know, and it's really expansive, you know, and that it's important to kind of like, even within all of our communities, there are, you know, there are different variations of us, right? Like, you know, and you know, from gender standpoint, you know, to you know, to race and ethnicity and demographics, age, and down to, you know, how you grew up, where you grew up, because some of what Anne's speaking about is it's different depending on if you're in an urban setting, in a rural setting, and how diverse your surroundings are, you know, the kind of schools you went to. You know, I think with, you know, we need to do a better job, certainly with trans community. I think that with athletes there, you mentioned Andrea Euro, we've done some on that, you know, subject, but I feel like that's, again, a rich kind of area, because it's what we, you know, we don't do enough of it. We you know, it's interesting because we have been talking about doing something before the ESPYs. We have been with our colleagues on at FX and the cast of Pose, and we're talking about joining and bringing some of this discussion, the intersection of sports and entertainment and some of these subjects with them. And we were planning a program, and then, like a lot of things, COVID happened. Not that we won't get back to that, but sometimes I love that the way in which we think about these subjects across disciplines, you know, and to bring, you know, beyond sports and to kind of connect with colleagues who are, you know, trying to process some of these issues in other spaces, you know, whether that's, you know, in entertainment or politics or elsewhere. So, you know, that's what Anne brings up is like, you know, we really have to figure out ways to connect with each other and develop broader communities, you know, so that we understand each other better. And I think that's what we try to do, always looking to partner with people that can help us tell our stories better.
Absolutely. Danita, we have a question from a student for you. I'm going to let Scott share it.
Gotcha. Okay. So this person chooses to remain anonymous. And I also want to point out that we have 10 more minutes left in our session, just to be mindful of our time. But so this person reads, I became aware of what appeared to be some controversy with the Derek Fisher not having much or any competition with his current job. What can we do in society and sports to ensure that the normal hiring best practices are followed, whether it's in a Rooney Rule in the NFL or otherwise? Students like me sometimes wonder why they didn't get an interview or a job, and hiring things like this can be demotivating, but obviously it's more important to stay positive in the job hunt.
Yeah, I think there's a couple different answers to that. I think from the Derek Fisher side of, even for us with that hire, because I know it's come up a couple of different times about, I think when he was originally hired, our GM at that time had noted that was like her number one pick and that's who she wanted. I think there has to be continued rulings on that. You know, each GM who leads a team has an opportunity to make decisions like that. That's why they're hired for those roles. So sometimes I think there's these cases where they do identify and be like, this is the person I want in this spot, for other reasons of like things that they've researched or things that they've seen, that they're like, this is why I want this person in this spot. But I also think it is also our responsibility as well to make sure that we're viewing from a larger capacity. In sports, a lot of the times what happens is we'll use a couple of different network sites and the same firms that actually hire. And I think it's a miss on all of us when we do that. And one of the things that we have to do is do a broader stroke of, are we going to diverse recruitment firms to actually hire the talent that we're bringing in? Are we just using the same network, the same thing over and over? Therefore, people are just hiring their friends or friends of associates. And so I think what needs to happen, and this is something that we've moved into as a business practice we worked on a while, is, and even with other teams I've worked with, is starting to diversify the routes in which the resumes are actually coming from versus just like pure referrals. And it's important, and it has to be something that's continually taught and pushed on from a leadership perspective, that if we don't do that, we're not going to get the best talent. You know, years ago in the sports industry, if you had never worked for a team, you weren't getting hired by a team. That was kind of how it was set up. But now, you know, they realize, you know, we need diversity of thought, we need different experiences. So people with different media backgrounds, brand backgrounds, like people are seeking out outside of their industry to bring expertise in. To answer your other piece of this question, like for yourself and like being like potentially discouraged in this, I don't think you should. I think what we got to do is continue to push forward. It's like, how do you get into more experiences? And that can come through your university experience or your high school experience, making sure that you're working with your counselors, connecting with some of your professors or teachers, or people that may want to actually be in the industry. LinkedIn, to me, is one of the most valuable sources that I didn't have when I was that young. And I know it may seem hard, and you might get a lot of no's and a lot of no responses, but keep pushing. I tell this tip to people all the time: come up with 3 questions, write 3 strong questions to somebody that you're interested in talking with. Pick 10 to 15 people. My background is in sales. I've been in sales my whole entire life. Sales is a numbers game, and so is getting jobs and experiences. And it's about volume at times for you to actually get in front of these people. So don't be afraid to keep pushing forward. Panels such as this, reaching out to people, the more experiences that you can get, especially now in this virtual standpoint of what we're doing. We're able to do I can do 10 times more panels because I'm not driving through LA, you know, and getting someplace, and people are trying to make this knowledge accessible. So as much as you can, seek it out. If you can't find it, keep searching. The internet is an interesting thing. But those are things I would say is that, you know, nothing you've ever really wanted in life truly came easy. Sometimes you got to fight a little bit harder and it can be uncomfortable, but realize the journey that you're on and like those couple of failures and a couple of tweaks that you have to get there, those things will build you. I have not gotten every single job I've applied for. I have not gotten callbacks. I have not gotten reasons why I didn't get the job back from people, but that didn't stop me from being able to continue to move forward. I just had to keep adjusting, keep moving forward, and keep finding ways to grow in order to actually succeed. And I still work on that every day now. You know, I have roadblocks and I'm just like, my God, like, am I just hitting my head against this wall right here? And I just encourage you to keep pushing forward in that capacity.
I love it. Thanks, Danita, for answering the many parts of that question. We have just a few minutes left. We have another terrific question I'm going to have Scott ask from a student.
Definitely. Let me scroll up real quick. So Angel again had asked, what can we do in high school or early college students do to bring forth change regardless of our career or position? Is there an act too small or too large?
Who wants to take this one?
I have a quick response. Nothing too small, nothing too large. If it's just making the person next to you feel better about their day, it helps in the process. Like being nice, you know, showing good, being a good human being and loving the people around you is an act that can help. Maybe that person's having a day that inspires them to be better. I don't think there's anything too small in acts of kindness to help us live in a better world.
Love it. Thanks. As we wrap up, thinking about this question and also thinking about what is something that a high school student could do today who's interested in a career in sport for good? What's maybe we could just do a lightning round of like one thing. Danita, you gave incredible suggestions in your last answer, right? LinkedIn and the good questions. What are some other really practical, tangible things that high school students today who are interested in using sport for good can do to do that work now and set themselves up for the career that they dream of also?
I have 2 quick things. I think the first piece, and we say this in a lot of our trainings with athletes, coaches, sport governing bodies, but one of the main ways to get outside of your bubble and learn something new is to diversify your social media feed. So I'm gonna send a few folks in that this is only 4 amazing people, but if you follow those 4 people today, you're gonna learn something new. And that's a really easy way to integrate new thinking into your daily life. And then the second piece is, if we're thinking again on a daily basis, if integrating sport for good into your daily life. If you see something, say something. If you're an athlete and you're playing on a team and there's a microaggression happening, somebody says something racist, homophobic, transphobic, sexist, whatever, say something, speak up, speak out. You can integrate that into your daily life practice, and it makes a huge, huge difference, because change really does start with us and with our having sometimes really challenging conversations with those closest to us.
Awesome, thanks, Anne. Kevin, what about you? What's one thing high school students could do today to make change today and to set themselves up for a career in using sport for good?
Look, I think there's a power in getting together with each other, you know, and today we're growing up in the digital age so that you can make anything you want. You know, you can put your message out there. There's a platform for you. You know, you get together, whatever you're passionate about, go make something, right? And put it out in the world. It could be a short video message. It could be something on TikTok that's inspirational. It could be something you might have your own Sport for Good platform. You create your site and you guys, you know, solicit, you know, uplifting messages. But go make something. You know, get together with those who are like-minded. You know, and there's power in collection, you know.
I love it. Danita, anything you want to add?
I kind of said it before on that of just, you know, I agree with Kevin. I think sometimes we don't realize the resources that are in front of us that we can use to spread positivity. So I definitely would say, you know, I agree with both of them on that. And then what I said earlier, but absolutely.
I love it. We're just about at time. I want to thank all of you for joining us, our panelists, especially Anne, Kevin, and Danita, for this conversation. I really want to thank our students who are with us here today, who are here because they care about this. And I'm really excited to see what you all do as you are doing this work right now in high school and in college, in the spaces that you have, and as you continue to grow in your careers and using sports for social change. I think one of the most important things for everyone to remember, right, is like we're having this conversation about using sports and what does equality look like in sports, and how do we, you know, achieve that in sport, and remembering that it doesn't stop at sports, and what happens in sports bleeds out into the rest of society too. And so this relationship between doing what we can in the industry that we're in, doing what we can for our teams, our communities, that then proliferates so much more broadly and can be a really key part of what we're looking for when we talk about racial justice, when we talk about expanding rights and equality for girls and women, and inclusion for LGBTQ plus people and people with disabilities, right? And on and on. So thank you so much to Anne, Kevin, and Danita for joining us, for Scott and Roger for just rocking it at the Sports Biz headquarters, and to all of you for joining us for this conversation, for the work that you do every day and that I know that you will do in these awesome careers that you are bound to have.
Certainly. Thank you, everybody. And also to our panelists, right after this session, we have a LinkedIn session. So it will teach you how to build your LinkedIn, how to utilize it, different career pathways, and how to network. So I'll be in attendance, and I really hope everybody is as well. But thank you to our panelists who came, and thank you for those who have attended. Does anybody have any last words?
Thank you, guys. Thank you, campers, for sticking with us. Thank you, panelists. Wonderful, wonderful information for the campers. Campers, I would reach out to all of our panelists and continue to learn, continue to educate, and continue to network. Thank you, Risa, as well.
Thank
Absolutely.
you. Awesome job, everyone.
All right.
Thanks, y'all. Bye.
Thank you.
See you guys.
Have a great week.